All right, so let's take a look at the Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. I wasn't sure of how to pronounce it, if it was Wildemount or Wildemount. Somebody on Twitter told me that it's Wildemount, so that's what I'm going to call it. So the Explorer's Guide to Wildemount came out today, Tuesday, on roll20. And they were kind enough to send me a review copy of the product. I recently got a review copy of the hardcover book. I reviewed this on Twitter last night. Based on what I saw, I haven't fully read the whole book. I haven't given it a thorough read. But based on what I did see, I really like it. I really like the setting. I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. When I first heard that there was a Critical Role based setting coming out, I wasn't too excited about it because I don't really follow Critical Role. I don't really know much about it, and I didn't think that it was going to be something I would enjoy. But reading the book a little bit yesterday on Twitter, flipping through it and checking it out on Twitter, I really liked it. It reminded me a lot of one of my favorite setting books ever in the history of D&D. A book that I think is the gold standard of D&D settings, and it's this one, the Forgotten Realms 3rd edition campaign book. And this book reminded me a lot of this book. There's a lot of things in here that I like. The way the regions of the world are presented, and the way adventure hooks are presented for each region. I think I counted 121 different adventure hooks in the book, ranging from the beginner tier to epic levels in the book. So you could take this book and you could basically run a whole campaign with it, just based on the hooks that are presented for each region in the book, which I loved. So we looked at the hardcover book last night on Twitter, and today we're going to take a look at the hi to the chat, Doug in Texas. Hi, Doug. Thanks for joining me. So today we're going to look at the roll20 version. And the roll20 version, if you're familiar at all with the way D&D books are laid out on roll20, this won't be too foreign to you. This will seem very familiar because it's laid out in exactly the same way that the other books are laid out for 5th edition D&D. So you start off with your cover here. Let's move this, hit this tab here, and go to the actual contents of the book. And I'm going to close them up because they can get a little crowded here. So you can see exactly what the book includes, right? So you have your start here tab, or whatever. You start here. What do you call those? I don't even know. You start here entry, then you have your welcome to Wildemount, and it's laid out like the book. These are chapters basically, and it's kind of laid out just like the book is laid out in the book. So in the actual book, let me take a look at the book here. I think it's 7 chapters, right? So you have 7 chapters, the last one being the Wildemount Bestiary. So the roll20 setup is a little different, right? So chapter 1 in the book is Story of Wildemount. Chapter 2 is Factions and Societies. Chapter 3 is Wildemount Gazetteer. Chapter 4 are the character options. Then you have your Adventures in Wildemount, Wildemount Treasures, and then the Wildemount Bestiary, which roll20 called Creatures and Monsters. And then you have your player art handouts and your supplemental material, which are unique to roll20. So let's start with the start here section. And roll20 information, it's a thank you for purchasing. Thank you for purchasing. Hey, Duval King Jaboob. I always look forward to your Twitter reviews. Thank you. No, thank you for following along, and thank you for joining me on those. I have a lot of fun doing those when I do them. It's really, really cool to be able to share my first look. When I do those reviews, it's always like a first. I'm reading the book along with you for the first time. They're not pre-done, like, so I don't read the book and then go back and do it on Twitter. I always look at the books for the first time along with you when I'm doing those. So they're a lot of fun for me to do. Doug in Texas says he just lost audio. I should be sending audio just fine. My audio is telling me that it's okay. Can anyone else in the chat tell me if... Okay, so Duval King says audio is good. Thank you, Duval King. So let's keep looking here at the... This is not my first time looking at the Roll20 interface for this book. I got this sent to me a few days ago. I just wasn't able to show it to you because there was an embargo. So I have looked at the Roll20 stuff. The book last night on Twitter, the actual physical hardcover book, was the first time I was looking at it. But this look on Roll20, I've already explored the Roll20 stuff for a few days already. I've been playing around with it. So let's take a look at the stuff that's included here. So you got the Start Here chapter with the Roll20 information. It kind of gives you some basic stuff. Thank you for purchasing the battle map scale. So it tells you how to use the maps and the gridded maps versus the non-gridded maps and how they play around with the Roll20 grid and the tokens. This is like nitty-gritty stuff, for like technical stuff, for you to be able to use the maps if you play with maps and tokens. Not everybody does, but if you do, then you want to read this stuff to really understand how the maps work. Game settings talks about the fog of war, the dynamic lighting, and all that stuff. Again, these are really like technical things you got to look at if you play games on Roll20 using the tokens and using the lighting and all that sort of stuff. Me personally, when I play games on Roll20, I don't use the dynamic lighting. I use the fog of war a little bit sometimes, but I try to use the tech as little as possible. Like I really want to just pretend I'm using a table, right? And I tend to play with a drawing tablet because it's very easy for me to draw like on a blank grid with the pen, with the stylus, as if I were drawing on a vinyl battle mat at my table here at home. That's how I use Roll20. I don't use the lighting stuff. I don't use the fog of war too much. I try to keep the tech out of the way as much as possible. Roll20, I love it because it's as simple or as complicated as you need it to be, and I think that's the beauty of the Roll20 interface, right? Module shortcuts. This is all, again, all technical stuff that has really nothing to do with the book. So, welcome to Wildemount. And welcome to Wildemount is basically a recreation of the first chapter of the book, where you do a deep dive into the book, right? So you have player handouts, which are kind of the art of the book. That's an awesome monster, whatever that is. Really cool. Great art. And this is really word for word what's in the book, right? So if you have the hardcover and if you have the Roll20 version, it's pretty much the same content as the book. Nations of Wildemount. Here's where it really like starts explaining to you the world. And then what's cool about Roll20 is that it's all hyperlinked, right? So if I click on Kryn Dynasty here, it'll open up the Kryn Dynasty entry with the artwork for their logo. The Kryn Dynasty, their logo is a 12-sided die. As you can see, they love the 12-sided die for some reason. I don't know why. Just kidding. And yeah, it goes. You have your entry here in the Kryn Dynasty. This is all taken out of the book again. He goes into the person figures of interest. This is from chapter, straight out of the book too. I want to say this is all from chapter 3 in the book. Let me see. Yeah, so the Wildemount Gazetteer, and I'm not sure what page it's on. I'm not gonna look to see if it's a word for word reproduction, but it is. And then here you have your NPCs, your figures of interest. What's in this book? So this is, again, taken straight out of the hardcover, chapter 1 of the book. It's all text copied and pasted from the book. Here is player art handout, the continent. It's a big, nice, big image of the continent of Wildemount. All these pages in Roll20, you gotta be careful, because then before you know it, you've opened up like 20 pages. The calendar and the time, it gives you the calendar, shows how it works. These notes are only visible to the GM. You could show them to the player, show to everyone. Roll20 is very, very easy to use if you've never used Roll20. It has a bit of a learning curve, but it's not too complex. You could really figure it out and get to playing relatively quickly with it, right? So again, the Welcome to Wildemount section, it really just goes over the world, a big overview, like a sort of top-down look at the world with the calendar, the moon, the daily life, the currency, the languages, the technology, right? Story of Wildemount. So the Story of Wildemount section, that's where the heavy sort of lore is in the book. It's kind of like where the creation story for the world is. Here's some art of an adventuring party. At first I thought, last night when I was looking at the book on Twitter, I asked if this party was the party from the show, because I don't know, because it's in one of the first images of a party in the book. I figured maybe that's the party from the show, but somebody told me that it's not. I don't watch, since I don't watch Critical Role, I don't really know who the characters are. So, but that's a cool party, and you get to see a Goliath there, which you don't see a lot of Goliaths in official D&D art. This book, especially when I got to the Pantheon, the gods section, it really reminded me of 4th edition for some reason. Some of the gods just stood out, like from the 4th edition days. Like Torog, the king who crawls, and the Raven Queen, which the Raven Queen actually, the first bit of writing in the book is actually told from the point of view of a raven, like a raven herald of the Raven Queen. Yeah, the Dawn War Pantheon, right? Which is the 4th edition Pantheon. So I got like some cool 4th edition vibes from this book when I started reading it. Okay, so the Story of Wildemount section is really just a bunch of lore. It's like a bunch of lore that I really have not read through. I haven't given it a thorough reading yet. I'm going to. Look at the art. The art in this book, there's some pieces in this book of art. There's some pieces that are like really realistic, and then there's some pieces that are kind of cartoony. And I'll get to those in a bit. So the art is kind of like, there's a bunch of different visions, which is kind of cool because you get a bunch of different interpretations of the world and characters and whatnot. And you could see that in the cover, for example. Like in the cover, it's kind of I don't want to say, it's kind of cartoony, not in a comical style, but sort of in the art, right? We keep going, but then here, like for here, you see like a more of a realistic rendering of a city, a castle. So the art kind of goes back and forth between realistic and cartoony, and really good art. I'm not knocking the art in any way. I like it. And then here in the more in the Story of Wildemount chapter, we have the gods, we have the deities here. So like the Raven Queen. Like my first introduction to the Raven Queen was in 4th edition, and here she's one of the main gods in the book. You have prime deities. You have betrayer gods, which are the evil gods, like Torog, the king who crawls. I remember him in 4th edition, crawling all over the Underdark. And then you have lesser idols. So yeah, there's a huge pantheon here. One of the things I pointed this out last night when I was doing the Twitter review was that Matt didn't go out and build like a whole new weird pantheon of all these invented gods that he had to. No, he basically took the stuff that was already there from D&D and he kind of reworked it and he shaped it to fit his world, and that was it. He didn't need to reinvent the wheel as far as a pantheon is concerned. And I thought that was a good call on his part. If I were building a world, and I'm not, but if I were building a world, that's probably what I would do. I would take the existing gods that are there and I would just plug and play them into, mold them and shape them into what I need for my world and just put them in there. I found that refreshing because it's also familiar, right? Like you don't have to relearn a whole bunch of new gods. Like if you want to pick up this book and play, a lot of these gods are going to be familiar to you. Morden, is a dwarven god, and Pelor, that sort of thing. All right, so factions and societies, and here we get into a whole bunch of different factions in the world. And again, every section here in Roll20 has artwork that you can show the players, and then a whole bunch of writing that gets into what the sections are about. I love this stuff because, again, you have your handouts here, and look at that. That's a high-res handout to show players. You have all these handouts, and then you have all these writings, and again, everything's hyperlinked, so you could just click on something else, and it takes you to something else quickly. Look how fast that was. So it's just good stuff. Oh, this is the guy I pointed out yesterday, King Bertrand. Yeah, I made a joke on Twitter that, since Matt and I are such good friends and we hang out all the time, he named this guy after me. My last name is Bertrand, without the D. So I said he named him after me. Anyways, so every entry here has a bunch of, I think they're leaving out in the Roll20 stuff. Let me check. Let me check real quick, because one of the things I loved about the book was the character hooks, right? The character hooks are in the Gazetteer, so we'll get to that later. It's not here yet. We're not there yet. Okay, so you have your factions and societies. You have your all this writing. There's a lot of heavy lore in this book, as a setting should have, right? Wildemount Gazetteer, and this was probably my favorite section in the book. So look at the size of this hammer this guy's carrying down here. That's a huge that's a huge weapon this dude's carrying down here, right? All right. So the Wildemount Gazetteer presents adventure hooks for low level, mid level, high level, and epic level parties for every region in the book. When I saw that, I was blown away because I think I counted like 120 something, 121 adventure hooks. You could run a whole campaign in Wildemount just using the adventure hooks that they provide, and you don't have to invent anything. You just take the hooks they provide and run with it. You could probably do a whole campaign. So let me show you some of the examples, right? So let's look at the Menagerie Coast. The Menagerie Coast, I love this coast because I think there's some Caribbean inspiration here. I happen to be Caribbean, so to me it was like very familiar. There's even some Spanish names. If you look at some of the NPCs and stuff, there's some names in Spanish, which I found great because I'm Hispanic. So let's take a look at the barren shores here. Barren shores, they go into the whole region, and then here's your an example of a campaign of a story hook, right? Be our guest. So it has a name, tells you what levels it's for. So this is for a beginner level, low level. The characters discovered a wrecked smuggler's ship, its ruined structure washed on shore. Inside, they find the long-dead bodies of the smugglers who once manned it, as well as the mysterious animated cargo that slew the previous sailors. Flying swords, rugs of smothering, and animated armor hunt the interior, while the baleful spirit that grants them life remains tethered to a golden chair hidden within the depths of the hull, seeking release from the curse that binds it there. So right off the top there, you're given an adventure scenario. And then what's cool about it is obviously that everything's hyperlinked. So you click on the flying swords and it takes you to the flying sword entry, the actions. So you could just run this real quick. Not a lot of prep time, not a lot of, and Roll20 makes it convenient. So every location has a good description, and most of the locations, I don't want to say every because now I'm seeing that, not every single location has a hook, but there are a lot of hooks here. A lot of hooks. So and some entries have more than one. So like, for example, here, the Sirius Mountains have 2 hooks, one for low levels and one for mid levels. The Unlucky Few for low levels. Here they're hunting fugitives. And Many Eyes for Many a Prize, mid-level. The characters are hired to accompany a curator of the Cobalt Soul to investigate the nature of this strange menagerie, only to discover that numerous curators have already been added to the display by an eccentric beholder who wants to build a beautiful museum of zoology. The characters must defeat the beholder, convince it to relinquish its collection, or steal the petrified victims. Wow, nice. And then again, you have to click on the things so you can see what the Cobalt Soul is. Then you have your beholder entry. All very, very convenient. So, yeah. So the rest of the character options, again, same type of setup. Your entry straight out of the book. When it clicks, so like for example, when I click on the turtle entry, it's linking me to the turtle entry from this book, not to a turtle entry, not to a generic turtle entry from some other source. So everything in the book has been reproduced for Roll20. Alright, so let's get down to the good stuff, right? The stuff that people really care about, and that's the maps, and the adventures, right? So here is the poster map of Wildemount. This is the same map that is included in the book. This map, each square is a 200-mile square. That the scale is 200 miles per square. It's a nice, beautiful map, beautifully rendered map. There's a lot of mountains. So we have the map, and then each some of the map is carved out into different areas, right? So the Menagerie Coast, for example, gets its own entry, its own map. And some of the city maps. This city map in the book has a scale mistake in it. I see they fixed it for Roll20. So 750 feet. Right, I don't know if you could see it here. So hold on, so the scale is 750 feet on Roll20. In the printed book, the scale says 750 miles, which would make this boat here the longest boat in the history of the universe, right? Right, 750-mile long boat. We're gonna need a bigger boat. You got it. So yeah, all your maps are produced, and the resolution is so good on these maps. Like, look, you don't really miss much. It's not pixelated. You can zoom in all the way, and it's a good resolution on these maps. So yeah, you have all your maps, everything. These maps remind me. You guys remember who remembers Campaign Cartographer? Anybody remembers the old Campaign Cartographer program? Back in the day, to draw maps with the little mountain icons that you would plug in and the little. All right, so let me see. Let's get past the maps and let's go into like adventure battle maps and stuff like that. Yeah, so this book, the battle maps and the included adventures, this book has 4 adventures in it, which I thought was amazing. Like 4 adventures, 4 beginner adventures from 4 different parts of the world. The battle maps are colored maps. They're not drawn in the black and white style we've been looking at lately in WOTC books that a lot of people have an issue with. I personally don't. I love that style. I call it the Dyson logo style, although it's not always Dyson Logos the artist, but it's in that style. And most of the recent releases have been in that style. This book takes a different approach. This book goes back to colored battle maps. It might be hand-drawn, I don't know. But it goes back to the colored battle maps. The artists, I haven't really explored who did the artwork for these maps. I know it's not Mike Schley. Mike Schley, who used to do a lot of WOTC books, he didn't do these maps. I could tell because I know his style quite well. This looks like a combination almost of a Dyson Logos with a little bit of color sprinkled in. That's an interesting map. So yeah, as you can see, roll20 includes all the maps. You don't have to draw anything. Includes the tokens. You can see all the tokens in there already. So like here's this room has the token built in. It's got the hit points. You could run your combats here easily. I'm not going to do a tutorial on running combat on roll20, but that's what that is. So yeah, up here in roll20 you have all your different maps that you would use if you were running a game. Roll20 works with layers, so like you have a map layer, a tokens layer, the GM info overlay, dynamic lighting layer. That's how this works. So let's keep looking at let's look at the adventures, right? Which is a huge selling point of this book, right? 4 beginner adventures, each set in 4 different regions of Wildemount. So you can get your taste of what adventuring in this world is, and get a taste of the different areas of the world, right? So using these adventures, each of these adventures designed as an intro to one of the 4 main regions of Wildemount, as well as some of the themes that commonly guide events in those regions. So it's a great entry to the world. Again, when I compared it to this book, the Forgotten Realms book, this book I believe includes 2 adventures. And I haven't really opened this book in a long time. But this book has an adventure called The Color of Ambition and an adventure called Green Bones. It does have two adventures. I believe one has to do with the Red Wizards of Thay, and the other one has to do with a green dragon. Somebody might correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what those adventures are in that book. So this book, Wildemount, has 4 adventures in it, and I thought that was a great thing to include. Sometimes we get happy when we have 1 adventure included in a book. I believe the Eberron book had 1 adventure. Is that right? Let's see. The Eberron Rising from the Last War book has a whole chapter on building adventures. Building Eberron Adventures. Yes, it brings 1 adventure called Forgotten Relics. But to be fair, it does bring a whole chapter on building Eberron adventures, which is fairly detailed in that book. It's a good chapter to really understand Eberron. So this Wildemount book has the 4 adventures: Tide of Retribution, based in the Menagerie Coast; Dangerous Designs, based in Western Winander, I don't know, Winander; Frozen Sick, in the far reaches of the biting north; and Unwelcome Spirits, Eastern Winander. And all these adventures are all for low level, 1 through 3, beginner character adventures. So you could really begin a party 4 times to see what region of the world, maybe you're new to this world, maybe you want to test out all the regions and see where you prefer to play in, or try out different character builds or different options. You have 4 different adventures to play with here, to really get a taste of the world. I thought it was great. So the way they're laid out in Roll20, like everything else, you have your writing with the different sections of the adventure, the different locations, with your boxed text here. You could run it right off of Roll20. You don't need the book at all. And then again, everything hyperlinked, so you could just click on a section if you need to and show it to the players. There's really not much to say. Jolly Dwarf, is there a map called the Jolly Dwarf? How that works? Let's see. Not sure now how the Croaker Cave. Oh, here it is. Okay. Yeah, so areas with a map included. You'll see the map in the write-up, and also as a actual page up in the toolbar here that you can go to. So it's called the Croaker Cave, and then you go to the Croaker Cave page here, and you see it here with all the tokens already built in and ready to run. So you're running the cave, you have your map here, you have your section open here as you're running, and that's it. You basically run your game as if you're running off a book. Very simple. Roll20 is a great thing. It's a great thing. And then finally, the book closes out with some magic items. I love these vestiges of divergence. So these items are really cool. Pay attention. This is really neat. So these items evolve with the person using them, right? They have a dormant state, an awakened state, and an exalted state. And then as the item evolves, the states provide different things, right? So here's something called Daneth's Visor, right? And it's a pair of goggles, right? So in their dormant state, you can see normally in darkness, magical and non-magical, to a distance of 60 feet. You have advantage on intelligence, investigation, and wisdom perception checks that rely on sight. That's fairly commonplace, right? In their awakened state, you can see invisible creatures and objects within 60 feet of you as if they were visible. You can see into the ethereal plane. As a bonus action, you can speak a command word and use the goggles to see through solid matter. So they gain a little bit of properties in their awakened state. And in their exalted state, you automatically detect illusions. You can see a bright aura around any creature that isn't in its true form, and you can cast the anti-magic field spell. So I thought the idea of a magic item that evolves with the wielder was a really cool idea. Really dug that. I thought that was a pretty nice way to improve on magic items and to sort of make him unique to the world and give him like something that is, you know, true to the world, like basic part of the world, right? Like to tie the magic item to the world. I thought that was kind of cool. The other thing that this book includes that's new, so that's new from a gamey perspective. That thing with the magic items is kind of cool. There was another thing that they did. Where is it? So it's called the Heroic Chronicle, and the Heroic Chronicle is a new system that allows players and the DMs to work together to build a character story, a character backstory. And as you're doing that, you can gain additional proficiencies, magic items, spells, or feats before the game even starts. So before the campaign starts, you're using this Heroic Chronicle to sort of ground your character in Wildemount and give him sort of benefits from that, right? So you have backstory for your character, and then you have a prophecy, right? A prophecy for your character, which are basically 3 goals or aspirations that your character comes with, right? And then these prophecy goals pay off whenever a prophecy is achieved or comes true or whatever through your character, you gain a mechanical benefit as a reward. So if you play towards your goals and you play towards your prophecy or the destiny of your character or whatever, you're paid off with some mechanical reward. And then obviously the dungeon masters can use these to generate villains with motivations and histories that are tied to the characters and whatnot. So I thought that was a really neat thing, and that's kind of like the big character creation thing in this book that's included in the book. It's sort of like the new thing for D&D. It's this Heroic Chronicle thing, and I think it works quite well. I haven't given it like a deep read yet, but I like the idea of it, certainly. I'd like to see how it could be adapted to other things like, you know, Faerun and other settings. And I'm sure there's some design space now in the DM's Guild, for example, to create a Heroic Chronicle for Faerun, you know, and sell that as a supplement for character creation and whatnot, for the Sword Coast or whatever. I'm sure we're going to see some of that stuff pop up. So, I mean, that's really it. I don't know if anybody has any questions. If anybody wants to ask me something about it in the chat. Otherwise, I don't really have a lot more to show. I've sort of given you a very thorough look at what the book has. Take a look at some of the handouts. Some of the art. A lot of it is art you've seen before somewhere else. A lot of maps. Really nice art. Good stuff. This fun looking halfling. I like that. So if no one in the chat has any questions, then I think I'm done then. That is my look at the Roll20 version of the Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. The new Dungeons and Dragons hardcover collaboration between Wizards of the Coast and Critical Role. I want to thank the folks at Roll20 for sending me this review copy. I want to thank WOTC and Wizards of the Coast for sending me a review copy of the Wildemount book. I was able to to show you that to you guys on Twitter yesterday. If you want to see that, go on my Twitter feed and look for it. You're going to find it there. You can find me on Twitter at NobiDM. And that's it. I hope to do more of these streams. I don't tend to stream a lot. But every now and then I like to hop on a stream and chat with the folks. So, all right, that's going to do it for this stream. I'll catch you next time. Thank you for joining me in the chat. Thank you, Doug. Michaela, thank you. Who else is on there? Doug in Texas, Duval King. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.